Good morning. Hi, welcome to our webcast. I'm Dina Herbelich, a partner and national practice leader for Moss Adams Professional Services Practice, and I'll get us started this morning on our session, Grow in 2021, Service Models and Digital Transformation. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us. We're pleased to present another in our ongoing series of continuing professional education webcasts to help companies and individuals conquer challenges as they plan for what's next. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget to the right of the slide view. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window below the slide view and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key.
Okay, thank you. Please do use that Q&A box to ask questions. We have a few prepared questions for our panelists to start off with, and then we'll get to your questions as we get into the session. The presentation you are about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances. And now I'm going to introduce my co-sponsor, Hugh Campbell from Cascadia Capital.
Morning, everyone. I am Hugh Campbell from Cascadia Capital. We are an M&A focused investment bank based in Seattle, and I am co-head of our business services group, which focuses on the vertical of business services, including consulting, staffing, and various types of IT services. And then I'm going to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists today. So we picked three very interesting people who run really interesting and growing companies in the Puget Sound region. So first is Christy Johnson. Christy is an entrepreneur, and strategist. She is currently building her fourth startup, which is Artemis Connection. Artemis is an outcomes-focused strategy consulting firm with experience helping companies build robust strategies, drive new business models, disrupt existing markets, and adapt to evolving competitive realities, and ultimately build strong organizations in a fast-changing world. Christy brings many years of working in corporate strategy, including 4 years at McKinsey & Company. And prior to that, she was an award-winning teacher in economics and mathematics. She has a a master's in education from Stanford and a BA from Western Washington. Christy, welcome. Jeff Dance is the founder and CEO of Fresh Consulting. Fresh is a digital innovation company headquartered in Seattle. Fresh builds brands, apps, systems, websites, robots, and autonomous vehicles. They just celebrated their 12th year, 4 offices, and has over 300 employees, and working primarily with UX designers, software developers, hardware engineers, and strategy consultants on their staff. Prior to Fresh, Jeff worked as a strategy and operations consultant with Deloitte Consulting, where he worked with companies like Apple Computer. And a little fun fact about Jeff, he's a snowboard instructor at Alpental and previously at Park City. So if he ever threatens to drag you down some slopes that he says are easy, don't take him up on it. Mark Mason is the co-founder and principal of Affirma. Affirma is a fast-growing Seattle-based company which helps all companies of all sizes and industries transform and modernize their business to stay competitive in ever-changing markets. They have a range of expertise from the Microsoft technology stack, digital marketing, design, web and application development, cloud, data and analytics, NetSuite, and more, and can help organizations large and small with nearly any challenge associated with technology and software. And Mark is an engineering graduate from SPU.
Thank you.
Well, so look, you all have grown your companies significantly. The question is, how have you done this over the years? Organic versus acquisitions, new markets, new services. Maybe Jeff, you can take that one first.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me. For us, I would say mostly organic growth. We've done a few acquisitions. We had one that was like a 1 + 1 = 5, but mostly kind of grown ourselves. How have we grown? I think when I started the company 13 years ago, there really wasn't cloud, mobile, social, digital, app stores, electric cars, like all this stuff really didn't exist in a significant or serious way. And so we kind of looked at just what was trending, what was becoming mainstream, and tried to help people stay fresh, stay current. And that's been sort of stuck with us. I think that's helped us grow a lot, is just try to stay mainstream with how technology is evolving and changing, recognizing that design is also a big part of how you bring kind of humans and technology together. And a few years ago, we said, "Are we still fresh? Are we still doing that?" And we recognize, oh, hey, the babies that have already grown up are still here. Like cloud is still going to be the backbone for so many things in the future. But other things like robotics and automation and AI, ML, and biometrics and IoT were these other new frontiers. And so we're kind of our biggest strength is sort of our breadth. It's also a weakness, but it's one of the key drivers of our growth. It's helped us diversify and focus on areas that are emerging and also discover ones that weren't. But I think, how we connect that and how we bring people together and companies kind of either to stay relevant or stay ahead has been one of the things that's driven a lot of our growth in the past.
That's great. And I know you've done a few kind of tuck-in acquisitions over time, Jeff.
Yes. What was the question? I missed it.
Well, just, I know that acquisitions have been part of your growth over time as you've kind of picked up new regions, new skills, and new clients through a few acquisitions.
Definitely.
So, Christy, you want to... Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, a couple of those have been like a 1 + 1 = 5 sort of scenario. So I think that has been a big part of our growth as well. Thank you.
So, Christy, you want to talk about the growth of Artemis?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun when we were prepping for this. So you're saying, share some stories. And if it's the kind of situation where the cobbler's children have no shoes, like highlight that as well. So what we spend our time doing for clients is trying to figure out where growth and innovation is going to come from for them. And, some of that can be organic. Some of that can be through M&A. For us, all of our growth has been organic. We have had a few smaller firms, especially in the last year, approach us about acquisition. We decided at the time it just didn't make sense. And with this past year in particular, which was, I feel so guilty saying this in light of what's happened in the world, but a really good year for us, both in terms of revenue and in terms of margin, we decided to really focus and get clear on what our core business is versus taking on any sort of complexity, hence saying no to, doing any sort of acquisition. With our organic growth, it's been a big experiment on like how to get business development staff. It's an area where I feel like I wasted a lot of time, energy, and money. Because, particularly folks who are attracted to the Artemis model, they come because they love the work, and that's great, right? That's why clients love them, and they do really good work. But they don't necessarily want to do the selling or the business development. That's why they left some of the firms that they were at. And so that's been kind of our nut to crack in being able to suss out what the need is for the actual work. It's relationship building, so it takes so long. And we've actually found it's much easier to build that capability in-house, just knowing it's a longer-term game than to go out and hire for it. And we're still in the thick of building that business development muscle internally with our consultants. And it takes a long time for people to own and learn how to do lead gen and scoping and selling. But it's been all organic for us.
That's great. And Mark, how have you guys managed the growth at Affirma? I know that you've experienced tremendous growth in the tech segment, both with tech clients and non-tech clients. So how are you guys handling that at Affirma?
Well, depends on the day. So as you mentioned, we've grown fairly rapidly. I remember, I think it was 2010 to 2011, and we doubled in size that year. And that was probably the worst year of my life. So I don't necessarily recommend for us, we found there's an optimal level of growth. And there's actually, I'll just share you an inside joke on the board. There's this inside joke that, hey, our strategy is grow 24% a year. And, one of the guys always likes to say that. And I'm like, that is not a strategy at all, but it's remarkably close to kind of what we've done. And so when I think about how we've done that, we have built a pretty robust business development team. So we're divided between hunters and farmers, and I would say so we're a total of about 600 employees. We're around $60 million of revenue, and the model is we have about I believe 25 hunters and about the same number of farmers. And so really we just in our model we just have a percentage of revenue that we assign to revenue generation, and then within that percentage in our business model we really try and allow those revenue teams the flexibility and those leaders in those teams to really come to leadership and say, hey, how do you propose growing? You guys are the ones that are out there, making the calls on LinkedIn, doing all that, just beating the bushes and everything. And so we've, really that's been our model, and it's been successful. We've mostly hired what I would say is like second job salespeople, so not completely fresh out of college, but with just a little bit of experience. So that's historically been our model on both sides of the organization. We also do marketing, but I don't want to talk too long. But that's the bread and butter of how we've been able to grow.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. So. That's a perfect segue into the next question, and I'll ask Christy first. But we've talked a little bit about sales. Marketing is the other leg of that stool, right? And your position as an advisor and as a company that helps other companies. How do you guys, Christy, think about marketing and your brand and thought leadership?
Yeah, this has been another area of growth. I feel like, again, the same theme of wow, we've tried a lot of things and wasted some time and money and energy, but we have learned quite a bit. I mean, I think for us, we're looking for unique spaces where we can carve out some thought leadership. There's an awful lot of content that's out there, and so trying to stand out above that can be pretty challenging. There are a few places where we made some bets, and I can share kind of how that has paid off for us. And, with our thought leadership, we're trying to do things that are very authentic to us as well. So feedback we often hear from the clients is that we're, a scrappier McKinsey or more entrepreneurial than those McKinsey, Bain, and BCG firms that they may have worked with before. And so with our kind of marketing and thought leadership, that's what we look to do as well. We do an annual summit. So we were talking a little bit about this before. We decided to actually delay until the fall because, a year ago we thought, oh, maybe things will be better by the end of 2020, and did a completely online session. And here we're just wanting to stay on top of emerging themes in innovation. We also care deeply about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the link between having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive company and innovation is really strong, but it's actually really hard to execute, as some of you may have experienced. So we usually have some themes around that. And that's worked pretty well for us. And then, the case studies, it's a little tricky in terms of marketing because often we're working on pretty sensitive things. And so most of our clients don't want us to name them, which is fine. So the case studies have actually been probably some of our most effective marketing as well.
That's great. Thank you. And Jeff, you guys at Fresh seem to have taken kind of a content-driven marketing strategy. I mean, anyone who goes to Fresh's website can see that you guys produce a lot of really cool and interesting case studies and videos and marketing material. How do you guys think about marketing?
Yeah, definitely do sales and marketing. The combination I think is really important. Sometimes people are heavier on one side or the other. We have 10 BD people, so we're serious about that. But a lot of them handle inbound leads, and that's because, as you said, we're serious about content marketing. It's a long form approach. It takes time, it takes energy. And so we treat, I think we're always selling, we're always recruiting, and we're always actually producing content as well. And so I think that's been a big part of our growth, is really the combination of all those. I think on a given week, we might have 50 touch points of people downloading stuff or sending us oh, hey, we have a need. And so a lot of our BD team is handling that inbound inflow. And a lot of that just comes from producing quality content. And it's content related to stuff we're already doing. And anyone that's in the services space, I saw there's a lot of customers in the services space. Obviously, that's the focus of this session. I think content from producing content, I think it just pays off. It's like a long-term asset that continues to deliver if you focus on quality stuff. So I think it's been big for us. And I think it decreases some of the load on some of the outreach. We're just now coming up with hey, let's be even more strategic with our outbound approach. And yes, we sell via relationships, but a lot of our business growth has been from inbound.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. So before I turn it over to Dana, I just wanted to we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about M&A. We at Cascadia, we're M&A advisors. So our daily job is helping companies sell. And just one thing I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about is the M&A environment right now for services businesses. I think the main message is right now it's a seller's market. That's great if you're a seller. It's great if you have gotten some scale and can really get the attention of either the big strategic buyers or private equity, which is increasingly playing a role in the space. The tough part of that is that it's hard to buy. If you're a buyer and it's a seller's market, then it makes your job difficult to find the right targets. They are also getting calls from a lot of others inbound. In order to be competitive in that market as a buyer, you have to offer them not just the valuation that's a market valuation, but also a compelling story of why they should join your team. So if anyone has any additional questions about M&A, happy to answer after. So I'll turn it over to Dana.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. That was that's a great segue to my question. And you all three mentioned the importance of organic growth for your businesses. You've worked hard to grow them starting on your own from scratch, and that's been a great strategy for you. Jeff, you mentioned your M&A experience, and I thought maybe I'd just ask if you could give us some insight in what's the most important thing for you when you're looking at a target, and maybe even share a little bit about your 1 + 1 = 5. Was that were you looking for that kind of additional scale, or did it just fall in your lap as you were doing due diligence? That's very interesting to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I would say the majority of our growth has been organic, but because it's been organic post fact because of some of the combinations that we brought together. And I think as we think about like what's most important, I think in M&A, I wouldn't say we're super experienced, but having done a few deals, I think that you learn a lot, and sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you win. I think the odds are generally against you. I think that's statistically proven. So I think the focus on culture is really everything. It's easily overlooked when you get into numbers and strategy and customers that you could pick up, that sort of thing. But I think we found culture is really everything. And so we're working on a potential deal right now. Our first 10 questions are about kind of team and culture. And part of our kind of analysis is, do they match our culture? And our culture focuses on nice people that want to grow, that have energy, and that are smart. And so do we see that in them? I think that's one, as we're thinking about how do you make this work? We heard that, hey, it can be really complex. It is complex. But in order to try to have an odds of winning, whether you're selling your company or you're acquiring someone else, I think you do want to anticipate a 1 + 1 = 5. You want to think hey, if we brought this together, we see the path to that. And so in a conversation earlier this week, we actually, with one of our potential companies we were looking at, we put down via numerical analysis, how we thought we could do a 1 + 1 = 5. And our experience in that scenario was acquiring a smaller hardware company. And that was okay, hey, we knew we had design strategy software. We knew that a lot of things were connecting into hardware, and the robotics and automation, and these new areas were kind of these big growth sectors that were combining with other things that we were doing. So as we thought about how to help companies stay relevant, we thought, hey, hardware is important. Then we realized hardware is hard. It's really hard. And so that's why we acquired a company, and post fact, we were able to combine those things and then have a more compelling solution to clients and pick up a lot more business, essentially. I think to summarize, it's can you anticipate that? Because I think you need that in order to even have a chance of getting a 1 + 1 = 2.2 or something like that.
Right.
So those are a few thoughts.
All right, great. Mark, any thoughts from you about targets or growth through acquisition, or maybe some thoughts as companies have approached you to acquire you that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned, we've done purely organic to date. Started the company, have never invested any capital, but we are feeling like we're getting to the size where that's starting to get a little bit more, to maintain those growth levels, that's starting to get a little bit more difficult. Just kind of law of larger numbers, relatively. So I would say what has been hugely helpful to us, and not to be super pluggy here, but Hugh has been really helpful in this area for us. Not only what it's like out there in the market, and also really getting us to think a little bit about, well, do we want to sell? Do we not want to sell? So if there's any founder owners on the call, I had a lot of preconceived notions that were actually incorrect. And so just even though we haven't executed a deal yet, a purchase, in talking with you, like we really were able to realize that, you know what, we don't want to sell right now. We want to continue to grow, even though it is a seller's market. But in doing that, we feel like mergers and acquisitions are going to be a part of that story. It's not going to be all of that story. We're not going to pivot our entire growth there, but we feel like, kind of like Jeff said, there's some opportunities out there where you can get that really nice accretive growth. And, we're in the early phases of that. I would say mentally where we're at, echoing Jeff, culture is like, it's just like a must be a given. One of my key things that I always tell employees matches well with what Jeff was saying is that, at Affirma, we don't hire jerks. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how good you are. We don't hire jerks. And when you think about, and that's a little dramatic, but when you think about an acquisition, there is the opportunity there to really introduce some things that you don't want to introduce into your company culture. So culture critical for us. Customers is really, really important. So we're looking in an acquisition, we're looking at what customers can we acquire and how can we cross-sell to them. So I'd say those are kind of a couple things about the acquisition side. And then I don't ever want to stop on the organic side or really reduce that a ton, because that's something I feel like I have not complete. None of us have complete control over anything, but I have more control over kind of the organic growth side. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear both of you talk about culture. And Christy, from what I know about from your company, it's a similar story. And Moss Adams has been the same. We were about 70 some, maybe 100 partners when I started 20 years ago. We're close to 400 partners, over 4,000 people. And a lot of that has been through business combinations, and culture is key. It's made that growth a little slower maybe than we would have wanted, just because you have to find the right fit. We can't serve our clients unless the client is getting the same experience from all their practitioners. That's very cool. I'm going to turn it to sort of a different question. Christy mentioned equity, inclusion, and diversity, and I think you were talking about it in the context of helping your clients strategize around that. I'm curious, probably from all three of you, about how you're looking at equity, inclusion, diversity internally, as perhaps acquiring new talent to help you deliver your service and grow organically, or how you're thinking about that if you were looking at new clients and how important those factors are with your customer base. Christy, I may turn it back to you since you mentioned it earlier, and then others can chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I will say this topic is so messy. So we see, especially I think this last year, we've seen some clients, really want there to be a silver bullet, something really easy that they can put into place. We tend to approach it the same way we do everything else, which is like, let's have a strategy around it and be really clear on the goals and like set some metrics and try some things, knowing that we're not going to get it right. And we know what we are seeing across the board. I'll talk external clients, then I'll turn it internal to what we've done. We have seen across the board an increase in desire to talk about it. And in particular, last year, the number of inbounds we had around wanting support and help for diversity, equity, and inclusion work, the willingness to pay is quite low. So we actually heavily subsidize this work. And it's something that we're constantly talking about in our strategy days on why it is that we're doing that. It's a bit of a longer term play for us in building relationships with our clients and helping them through these really, really hard, emotionally hard, incredibly necessary topics. Internally, we skew female, right? So we're actually actively trying to get men, because we want to represent the United States in terms of population and gender and race and ethnicity and age. So it is something that our head of people is constantly monitoring and activating. And we've actually found referral strategy has been the greatest thing here. If you have happy, diverse clients and employees, then they'll refer those into you as well, which really puts the onus on us to make sure that we can be inclusive. We have a few things that we do with our pulse survey. we're tracking metrics and just making sure everyone feels like they belong and that they're heard and that their voice is respected. But it's definitely a journey. I mean, I will say this year's been a particularly hard one for all the leaders that I've been working with, including myself, trying to do work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's felt really heavy with some of the systematic racism that we've just seen in our society.
Thank you. Mark or Jeff, one of you want to?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Christy mentioned. On our side, we clearly have work to do in this area internally, and we don't consult on it externally. So I'm going to only just speak to what we're doing. Being kind of an engineering data-driven company culture, we're implementing a tool called Diversity Window. It's diversitywindow.com, and it's really allowing us to get all the data and benchmark, and then they're bringing in some consulting as well. So we are trying to invest in this area, and specifically being a tech firm, we've seen a lot of great improvement in our kind of diversity and male-female ratio is getting better, but we still have a long way to go. And we feel like, hey, the first step is at least getting the data, seeing how we stack up, and then let's bring in somebody to kind of help us. We've definitely done surveys and things like that. And because our company core value stack is client satisfaction, employee satisfaction, financial health, employee satisfaction has been really, really key for us. And so we've done a lot of good things. And so we have some goodwill there with our employees, but there's definitely expectation that we're doing more in this area. So we're investing in but this is a journey area for us. We're definitely still growing here.
That's good. We all are. Jeff, anything to add or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think for us, we have a big focus on inclusion and belonging. I think that, we're a technology engineering company. We kind of benchmark 40% diverse if we look at ourselves. Our big focus is trying to make this for everyone. Like, how is this something that is a company-wide initiative? And I think a lot of focus on inclusion and belonging. From a diversity perspective, there's just more focus from a recruiting perspective. And one of the rules we recently implemented is called the Rooney Rule, where we're kind of looking for ethnic minority candidates, and also we're looking for more female candidates. I think it's the odds are against us as like a technology engineering company if you look at like the candidate pool and the typical makeup of companies in our space. But we believe in diversity from an innovation perspective, and I think we have lots of room to grow. But I think our strategy is, hey, let's focus on inclusion and belonging. Let's have the recruiters kind of help from the diversity makeup perspective. But we think we're trying to get everyone behind this and realize, hey, if we can just be more inclusive, we can go across function, we can go across practice, and that can connect with everyone. I think diversity, just focusing on diversity alone, people find it divisive, and they actually have a lot of different opinions and perspectives and feelings. And so we've done trainings, and a lot of those feelings come out, and it tends to be, it's a lot harder than we thought. And so again, our big focus is sort of inclusion and belonging as a whole, but more tactically, more focus on diversity from a recruiting perspective, and then sort of, just benchmarking over time, seeing how we're doing.
Great, thank you. Hugh, I'll turn it over to you to start our technology conversation, and I'll go check the Q&A and see if we've got any questions coming in.
Sounds good. And I would, as a reminder, I would encourage people to ask questions in the Q&A chat function, because we'll have about 15 minutes at the end to take questions from the audience. Technology obviously is really rapidly changing the world. I would love to hear from you all, starting with Christy. What technology or innovation gets you most excited right now, whether it be for your company or just out there in the world amongst your client base?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. It's an exciting time. We're living through a lot of technology innovation. And again, like we work with, a lot of lower to mid-market companies, quasi-government, foundations. And so sometimes you'll find they get very seduced by the technology, and you'll hear all these words like blockchain and AI, ML, cloud, but folks don't necessarily understand where there's the greatest potential. We're quite excited, especially being here in the Pacific Northwest around AI and ML. It all depends on having like good data and knowing what business questions that you're trying to answer. But the advancements are pretty phenomenal. Plus, like the University of Washington and the caliber of the research that's coming out there, and the fact that so many of the high tech companies have their AI shops up here is pretty interesting and exciting. So, like from a client standpoint, that's what we're pretty excited and happy about. For us internally, we were actually founded remote first 5.5 years ago, and we didn't used to lead with it. And in fact, at the 2020 town hall, I said, remember, there's a huge bias against remote work. So the onus is on us to like prove to clients we can deliver value being distributed. So our investments have always been in things that make it easier for us to work together remotely and to ideate and innovate and all of that. So it's been, Zoom, which we've been using forever, and Slack, and some of that functionality is what we've leveraged internally, and we will continue to do so.
Awesome. Jeff Dance.
The question was technology trends we're most excited about?
What technology trends are you most excited about, either for your business or out there in the client world?
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is, for us, this is, like I mentioned at the very beginning, like this is a big focus for us. It's one of our unique competitive advantages, is sort of like how we kind of look at what's changing from a technology perspective, what's growing, and how do we kind of position ourselves to help companies grow in those areas where it's relevant. To the point just mentioned, a lot of times it's just, hey, these are buzzwords, the lot's happening. But when we look back and we say, like, hey, 12 years ago, we didn't have really smartphones and apps. And like, look how that's changed us. It's changed our workplaces. It changed our personal lives. Like, the technology is changing us. And so I think it's like how do we think about getting ahead and think about how will this impact me, and how do we get ahead? That's kind of what our mindset is how do you stay relevant? How do you stay ahead? And how do you also ignore things that don't matter? It's like, don't worry about Twitter if you don't need to worry about Twitter. Like, or if you're doing marketing, it's like, oh, what do you ignore essentially? Some of the areas that we're tracking that we're excited about, obviously robotics and automation, it's like, and that's, we see like more and more stuff happening there. And there's a human side to that. Again, it's like, how do you balance augmentation and integration and not replacement of people? There's no wagon wheel makers anymore. It's like things continually change, and sometimes, change happens and it's hard. But how you connect with technology and how you also disconnect as humans, that's philosophically, like we're excited about that trend. Not just the new cool stuff, but also like, how do you magnify your potential? How do you also disconnect as human beings? We even put out a thought leadership piece called balancetech.org, just around this relationship with technology, and getting ahead of that relationship. And that goes for individuals. It also goes for companies. We talked about AI, ML, again, another big thing we're hearing a lot about. And you've heard the word smart, in the last like 10 years a lot. Oh, smart this, smart this. Really, things have been dumb. They've been like connected to the internet and providing a little bit of data. So we're connected, but we're not truly smart. And I think the new AI sort of frontier, potentially trillions of dollars kind of industry will make things smart. And I think embedding that AI into not crazy AI that's going to take over our lives, just making the work we do or the way we consume information smarter. I think there's a lot of potential there. That's a big area that we're excited about. And then the future of 3D computing is something like we're thinking about. You've heard a lot about AR, VR, very slow space right now that we thought would be bigger than it is. really kind of slow. But the future, I think, think about the Alexa and the Echoes and these voice AI devices that are all sudden in all of our homes, like a product that is going to go so much bigger than it is right now. And that's like an example of 3D computing. Like typing might be clunky at some point, right? Where the future of 3D computing is where technology becomes more invisible. And so, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening. And then there's sort of like, how does that affect me as a person? How does that affect our company? And how do we stay ahead and stay relevant? I think that for me, it's not just about like the tools that you need to have like modern collaborative tools for the next, the growing generation that's becoming a mainstream in our workforce. Like that's like a given. And if you need help with that, like that's something to focus on, but also thinking about what's ahead. It's more about like our relationship with technology as a companies and as individuals.
Awesome. Mark, how about you? What tech trends are you most excited about?
I think Jeff and Christy have done a great job kind of talking about some of the newer stuff. I'm going to take it a slightly different direction, but still kind of in the same vein, I think. I'm really I'm excited about the unintended consequences that this really terrible pandemic is having. In anything you have something so huge and so impactful, obviously there's a lot of really negative direct things, but I'm really excited actually about the unintended positive things. And I'm an optimist by nature, so I'm always kind of, figuring we'll solve the bad stuff eventually. Been saying that for a while though. So, but for us, just the change in work over the last 9 months has been really quite amazing. I mean, I signed a lease for my main office space like months before the pandemic, and so I'm like, oh, well, that's a little painful, but we're really surprised at and this is everyone's saying the same thing, right? But at how easy that this shift to remote has been, and how productive and effective that we've been as a company, and technology has played a huge role in that. And we're, part of what we do is we roll that out for our clients, right? So we're a big Microsoft implementer, and so we're doing a lot with with SharePoint and Teams and all that kind of stuff, and that's great, but it's not seamless. And so a lot of the change management type of things have been a really growing thing for us. And so how do you actually help your clients integrate that? But for us, we're super excited that we can go most places, and we're big bullish on the Midwest. So we're growing very, very rapidly, in the Midwest region on our office there. So it's not exactly the answer, but I would say when I think of technology, I'm just excited about just all the new options we have available to us that we didn't really know necessarily that we had, or that we were afraid wouldn't work.
Yep. Yeah, well, just a little aside, we were speaking with a partner at Accenture a few weeks ago, and talking about your real estate lease. Accenture's main kind of building in New York City, they're giving up the lease. They're letting the lease expire because they're not going to have thousands of people in an office in Manhattan. So, they're either at client sites, they'll have kind of smaller sort of satellite offices and things like that. But I don't know how many, tens of thousands of square feet they had in Manhattan, but it will be no more. So that's like pretty interesting. It's definitely going to change kind of the way people are working.
Yeah, but we are definitely seeing, we talk about the positive and then the unintended negative of the positive. We're definitely seeing challenges in attrition, which I think when you have a really strong company culture, like I feel like we do, when you're not around people every day, the job becomes more transactional, feels like. And frankly, we do see a bit of the, the online fatigue of you can only do so many virtual happy hours, right? So like, it's a challenge. It's great. It's hard. It's a mixed bag.
Yep, absolutely. Great. So we are now, it's 10:45 Pacific, so we have about 15 minutes left. We have a few more questions, but we would like to prioritize questions from the audience. So we have a good one here from Kristen Lindenmuth from Jackson, Maine Architecture. And she asks, let's see, would you have any recommendations regarding how I go about finding companies to acquire? We have identified a section of our business that we would like to grow, but we've realized that the best way to do that would be to acquire a small company that specializes in this area. So maybe Jeff, you can, and I'm happy to chime in as well, but maybe Jeff, you can talk a little bit about how you've come across the acquisitions that you've made, and if you have any kind of ideas or advice for someone who wants to go down that path.
Hugh, I think you're more the expert here, but I think high level for us, it's been just more networking, like, locally, as we think about local companies, and then getting help from an advisor like, Cascadia or other. You'd be surprised that there are already like maybe 100 companies nationwide that are of a size that are interested in potentially getting acquired. And so when you can tap into some of those larger databases through a partner, options I think are really important, much like recruiting. Like, I think it's easy to get excited about someone, but when you interview like 7 people, then you may completely change your mind, right? And so I think that's like, I think the database is there. I think local is awesome, right? If you can connect with people locally. So just in your networks and like, is there a small company like us? If we did a little bit of analysis or in that sector that you're looking for, I think that's always good. But I think getting some help is important.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would add to what Jeff said is when you are looking to acquire a company, especially something somewhat specialized, there is an aspect of it that's a numbers game. You might get lucky and just the right target right away. But if you think about what has to come together in order for you to make that acquisition, you have to find the right company, they have to be the right size, the right geography, and they have to be for sale or willing to sell. And you have to agree on a valuation that everyone's happy with, and a structure and employment agreements and all the other things so really, I mean, to find one target, you have to start with 25 or 50, right? For all those things to come together in the perfect thing. So there is a lot of, kissing frogs, turning over stones. And also there's a time component, right? Particularly on the is it for sale thing. You might talk with someone now and they're just not at the right stage, but 6 months down the road or a year down the road, they might have a change in circumstance or in their business and finally decide, that Christy Johnson was really great. I'd like to be part of her company. Maybe I'll call her back and take her up on a discussion here. So that's what I would say about that.
There's also some really good data sources. So we'll see folks pull like Privco data or even Puget Sound Business Journal lists and just build it out and work the list. And then it's similar to business development, where it just takes an awful lot of time. And the ones that we see do a particularly good job at this are really good at the relationship building right now. There's a lot of awfully fatigued founders. And so if you can build the relationship and convey that like you're passionate about their business and you understand what those things are that are most important to them to protect, it can be a bit easier. That's what we see with our clients, at least. We haven't done it ourselves.
That's all great advice. There's a couple of comments in the questions about culture. One just adding, I think the audience member was just adding that culture is a really important factor when you're looking for a target.
For sure.
The other question is, and actually, Christy, this won't be applicable to you because you've always been virtual. But I mean, Mark, you hit it on the head, that the culture piece, the sense of belonging, the human interaction that we used to have that we're missing, which changes these really exciting, interesting careers into jobs when you're remote sometimes. And so how do you counteract that? So the question really is, how do you preserve that culture that you've worked so hard to maintain during the COVID working environment? I'll pick on someone. Mark, I'll pick on you since you mentioned it a little bit.
Sure. Well, I don't think anyone is necessarily experts yet, but we're learning quickly. And I would say, I think there's a strong chance of overreaction in kind of this medium term. I mentioned, I kind of groused about my my office lease, but I think we will. Once we're past this, we'll definitely use the space, and we still are definitely going to be expecting people to spend some time in the office. I think the big change is going to be this mindset of people can't do their work if they're not in office. That's the big thing, right? So the office becomes more of an opportunity as opposed to any sort of enforcement mechanism or anything like that. I think we'll still have very fresh new employees that are early career, probably work out of the office, but every day. But in general, we will change the office into much more of a, hey, it's here if you want it, 2 to 3 days a week, maybe team, a lot of team building type stuff. I think, we're going to have more restaurant spend. It's just going to change. Right. But we're going to try and not overreact to kind of the remote thing because we actually want people to be together. We think it's an important part of any job. And, and I think it's also going to vary based on market for us. Some of our offices will be more in person than others, and it's just going to be a much more flexible model. If that's the word everyone's using. So, yeah,
I personally cannot wait to get back into my office. I'm going to switch to another question here to get through as many as we can. Here's the question. What is the resistance to making the transition from the current state to the future state in terms of where you see your business going and the shift in business strategies? And what's the most important, or how relatively important are people, process, and technology? Christy? I can repeat that too.
Sure. I was like, I get this question first. Thanks.
I should have put your name first. It's a long one. Yeah.
It's totally fine. I mean, it varies depending on the organization. I think for the bigger companies, it's just awfully hard to explore, right? There's lots of academic literature on, if you have a multi-billion-dollar business, why are you going to pursue something super small in the beginning? Hence why they tend to go with more acquisition. I am seeing across the board, and this does marry a little bit with that last question around remote, that sometimes it's just lack of vision and communicating that vision. And I think especially in a remote environment, you have to communicate so much more in so many different modes to get everybody on the same page with the vision. I think specifically at Artemis, I have a lot of working parents. And so I think some of the resistance has been, gosh, this whole caregiving, working is just pretty tough, especially when you're in professional services working with executives that have a lot, which is why, we'll continue to make the investments in our people because we believe that, people, especially diverse teams that can work well together, can solve these really hard problems. So, it varies kind of across the board, but I do see a lot of times a lack of vision And maybe that's just because I'm working in a lot of private equity spaces where they love their spreadsheets and they love their numbers, but that doesn't inspire the team, especially if you go all the way down to the front lines.
I have a couple of things to add. What Christy said, I agree. I think that as we think about resistance, I think we've made the mistake of like changing too fast, and like we've grown pretty fast, and so we'll like roll out changes. But I think we realize like change management is like a serious thing, and really like the more uncertainty, the more change, the more communication you need. And so it's like, in the uncertain time of this last year, it's like more uncertainty, more communication, like more change, more communication. So I think change management is really good for the resistance. But as far as like people, process, and technology, I think we found like we need to up level in all of those areas. Like as we grow, we need like more structure. We need different people. As we grow, as we become more autonomous, we need actually a different type of process. And we need more standardization. We need different technology as we grow. Like we keep growing out of things, and I think it's all of those things kind of combined, not like a singular thing that continues to up level the organization. And I'm speaking of like going from 0 to 300. I know it's different from 300 to 1,000, 1,000 to much larger. But I think like change management came to mind. Like we're students right now of like change management, trying to do this better, so we can prepare for more growth, and then kind of looking at all of those areas, going like, hey, where do we need to kind of get different people or promote people? How can we add more a structure around process that stabilizes how we do something on a repeatable basis, and then what technology do we need to continue to invest in? It's not like a one and done. It's not like, hey, we need to continue to invest in all these areas as we continue to grow, if growth is a big part of your objective.
Great. So maybe a quick fun one to finish things off here. So let's just say that everyone is vaccinated, COVID is no longer, and we're all free to do whatever we can. Mark, what's the thing that you're looking forward to most?
Man, getting like a bunch of people out on my boat this summer. Just like, and if I have to if I can do shove them off the boat, I can actually like pick them up and throw them, and I can be within 6 feet of them, So,
Christy.
Oh, such a good question. I really have the itch to travel. I used to travel a lot. McKinsey part of me. So we've been daydreaming as a family about, do we go to New Zealand and Australia, or do we spend, 6 weeks in Europe? I don't know, but we want to do some traveling, some hardcore traveling.
I'm with you there. Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, I'm with Christy. A little more travel. We did a couple weeks in Hawaii earlier before they kind of closed things down. And while I was working, and I had my 4 kids, and it was like, we would finish the day earlier because I was getting up earlier, and then I was like, let me go play with my kids, and it was like magical, And so being able to do more of that, and especially if we have like more flexible schedules in the future, seems pretty exciting.
Great. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our hour here. So a special thank you to Christy Johnson, Jeff Dance, Mark Mason. We really appreciate you all taking your time and sharing your insight with us today.
Yes, thanks everybody. Thank you everybody for joining us.
All right.
Have a good week.
If anyone in the audience has any further questions, feel free to get in touch with Dana or with me, and we're happy to connect you with the others on the call as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.